Family comes first, Nora. That was the text that shattered my morning peace. I sat at my kitchen table in Milwaukee, the sunlight warming my coffee as my father's message glowed on my phone. He wanted $2,200, not asked, demanded, to help fund my brother Tyler's graduation party. The same Tyler who hadn't shown up to my 5-year-old son's birthday last weekend. My name is Nora Bennett. I'm 29, a dental hygienist, and a single mom to a boy named Lucas. His father walked out before he was born, but the people who really broke me weren't the ones who left. They were the ones who stayed and kept taking. 3 days earlier, Lucas had been standing by the window in his superhero t-shirt, bouncing on his toes, asking every 5 minutes, "Is Grandma here yet? Did Grandpa bring Uncle Tyler?" Each time I told him, not yet, until the words stopped meaning anything. By 3 p.m., every guest's car filled our driveway except theirs. The bounce house roared with laughter, candles flickered on a cake that cost half my grocery budget, and still, nothing. No call, no text, no excuse. At 4 p.m., my sister Bethany finally sent a message. "Sorry, something came up." 3 words, no apology, no mention of Lucas. When the last child went home and the yard was littered with wrapping paper and deflated balloons, Lucas turned to me and whispered, "Mama, did I do something wrong?" That question hollowed me out. I held him tight and promised, "No, baby. You did everything right." But inside, something inside me broke. Quietly, completely, reading my father's demand for money just 3 days later, I saw the truth I'd been avoiding. This wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. When Tyler's car broke down, my dad called me to contribute. When Bethany wanted new furniture, Mom hinted that I should help. Every time I tried to say no, I was guilt-tripped with the same line. Family takes care of each other. But family, in our house, meant me taking care of everyone else. I'd been paying for loyalty that never existed. The only time my phone buzzed was when they needed money or validation. Not when Lucas had a doctor's appointment. Not when I got promoted. Not even when I spent my birthday alone. I opened my banking app, typed in $1, and sent it to my father with the note, "Best wishes." It wasn't much, but it was the first honest payment I'd ever made, $1 for decades of disrespect. My father replied within minutes, "There must be a mistake. You owe $2,200. I didn't answer. Instead, I scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in months. Gregory, a real estate attorney who'd helped me refinance my mortgage last year. Because what my father didn't know was that I'd quietly removed his name from the deed months ago. He thought co-signing my mortgage meant ownership. He thought it gave him power. But now my house was mine, my locks, my rules. That night, as Lucas slept with his toy dinosaur clutched in his hand, I looked around my small living room, the lights I hung, the couch I paid for, the home I built. For the first time, I didn't feel like a daughter failing her family. I felt like a mother protecting her child. They called it betrayal. I called it freedom. Because sometimes, family doesn't come first. Sometimes respect does, and that's the day I stopped financing their love and started investing in my peace. When I sent that single $1 to my father, I didn't just send money. I sent a message. I'm done being useful. But the truth was, this moment wasn't born overnight. It was built over decades. One ignored birthday, one broken promise, one quiet humiliation at a time. I grew up in a house where love had conditions, and fairness was a fairy tale. My father, Gary Bennett, believed control was a form of parenting. He didn't need to shout. His silence was louder. His disappointment could fill a room until you apologized for things you didn't even do. My mother, Elaine, was the perfect enabler. Her favorite sentence was, "Let's not make a scene." She used calmness as a shield, always defending my father, even when she should have defended me, and my siblings. Tyler, the golden child. Bethany, the baby who needed protecting. And me, the middle one, the responsible one, the fixer, the one who didn't need help, so no one ever offered it. When I was 12, Tyler was 9 and already a handful. My parents called him spirited, which was their nice way of saying he never faced consequences. If he failed a class, Dad blamed the teacher. If he crashed his bike into a neighbor's fence, Mom blamed the neighbor. Meanwhile, I was making lunches, helping him with homework, and pretending I didn't notice the imbalance. When Bethany was born 2 years later, I became more than a sister. I became a second mother. While Mom needed rest, I fed bottles, changed diapers, and rocked a crying baby to sleep on school nights. Adults would say, "Nora's so mature for her age," but what they meant was, "Nora does everything we should be doing." That's when I learned my first hard truth. In our family, usefulness was the closest thing to love. The pattern followed me into adulthood. When I graduated high school, we celebrated with a store-bought cake at home. When Tyler graduated, my parents threw him a party at a steakhouse with 50 guests and a custom banner. When I got my first job as a dental hygienist, Dad said, "That's nice, but you should have gone for dentistry." When Tyler got a minimum wage job at an auto shop, they said, "We're so proud of how hard you're trying." When Bethany failed her first semester of college, Mom said, "She's just finding herself." When I got pregnant at 23 and told them the father had left, Mom said, "We're disappointed, Nora. We expected more from you." They never offered to help. Not when I was alone in the hospital giving birth 2 weeks early. Not when Lucas was born and I had to take the bus home because Dad didn't want to risk scratching the car. Not when I worked double shifts to afford diapers while Tyler got a brand new $12,000 car after totaling his first one. When I asked Mom how that was fair, she said, "Tyler's going through a rough time. You wouldn't understand." No, I understood perfectly. They only helped people who needed saving, and I'd been too strong for too long, too capable to be cared for, too quiet to be heard. When Lucas was 18 months old, my car broke down. The repair cost $800. I called Dad thinking maybe, just maybe, he'd be there this time. He gave me a 20-minute lecture on financial responsibility before agreeing to lend me the money. Lend, not give. I paid him back in 6 months, every penny, even though it meant living on rice and beans. 2 years later, Tyler got a DUI and totaled his car. Dad bought him a new one the same week. No lecture, no loan, just love. I asked Mom about it. She said, "Tyler's under a lot of pressure right now." I laughed. "And what about me?" She didn't answer. A year before all this, before the birthday, before the dollar, before the locks, I'd tried to talk to them. We sat in their living room. I told them I felt invisible, that Lucas deserved grandparents who showed up, that I needed more than silence and guilt. My father crossed his arms and said, "You're being too sensitive. We treat all our children the same." Mom nodded. "You're imagining things, sweetheart." That was the moment I learned the word gaslighting. My therapist explained it later. When people manipulate your reality until you doubt your own memory. They didn't argue the facts. They made me question whether the facts even mattered. After that, I stopped trying. I sent polite texts on holidays. I smiled through family dinners. I pretended not to notice the way they'd ask about Tyler's new car before asking about Lucas's new words. But even after everything, some small part of me, the little girl who used to rock Bethany to sleep and hope for a thank you, still wanted their love. That's why I'd invited them to Lucas's 5th birthday party. That's why it hurt so much when they didn't come. Because I didn't expect them to show up for me. I just thought for once they'd show up for him. That night, after Lucas fell asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The decorations were still up, the cake half-eaten, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge. And I realized I wasn't sad anymore. I was angry. Not the loud kind of anger that burns fast and fades, but the slow, deliberate kind. The kind that fuels change. It was the night I stopped hoping for their love and started building my own peace. The day after I sent my father that $1, I knew something had shifted. I didn't check my phone the next morning. I didn't wait for a text or brace for the guilt trip that always followed. Instead, I made pancakes for Lucas, burned the first batch, laughed, and made more. For once, my day didn't revolve around their reactions. But by noon, the peace broke like glass. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from my mother. Her tone was syrupy sweet, the kind that meant danger. Nora, your father's worried. You've been acting strange. We just want to talk. Don't shut us out. Family sticks together. Family sticks together. The same phrase she used when Tyler crashed my car in high school and Dad made me apologize for being too emotional. I deleted the voicemail. At 3 p.m., my doorbell rang. 3 times. Hard. I looked through the peephole and my stomach dropped. Dad. He stood there in his khaki jacket, hands on his hips like he was about to inspect a soldier. Behind him was Mom, her purse clutched tight, pretending this was a friendly visit. I cracked the door just enough to speak. Dad, this isn't a good time. He pushed against the door, forcing it open another inch. Nonsense. You don't turn family away. My pulse spiked. Yes, I do. Especially when family forgets boundaries. He froze, like the word boundaries was foreign. Mom smiled softly, the diplomat. Honey, we just came to talk. We're worried about you. Sending that $1 and that's not normal behavior? I took a slow breath. What's not normal, I said, is demanding money from your daughter after ignoring your grandson's birthday. Her smile faltered. Dad's voice hardened. Watch your tone. You wouldn't even have this house if I hadn't co-signed. And there it was, the control card. The invisible chain he'd been yanking for years. I stepped fully into the doorway. You mean the house I refinanced last year? The one with my name on the deed now? That house? His face drained of color. You did what? Mom gasped. You went behind our backs? No, I said, calm but shaking inside. I went behind your control. For a long second, nobody spoke. Then Dad's jaw clenched. You ungrateful little... I slammed the door. He pounded once. Twice. Nora! You open this door right now, or I'll... I cut him off through the wood. Or you'll what? Call the police and tell them your daughter won't hand over her paycheck. Go ahead. Silence. Then tires squealed as his truck pulled out of the driveway. I locked the door twice, leaned against it, and finally let my knees give out. For the first time in my life, I'd said no, and for the first time it actually meant something. The next day, the retaliation began. It started small. A text from Tyler. You think you're better than us now? Dad says you're turning your back on family. Then from Bethany. You didn't have to embarrass them. You know how sensitive Mom is. I stared at my screen and realized how well-trained we all were. Each of us fluent in manipulation, guilt, and silence. But only one of us was ready to break the language. I didn't reply. By Friday, it got worse. Dad called my boss, told him I was having emotional problems. Thankfully, my manager, Rebecca, pulled me aside and said, he sounded intense. I figured there was more to the story. I almost cried with relief. Someone believed me. That night, Destiny came over with Thai food and wine. We sat at my kitchen table, the same spot where my family had shamed me 100 times. And I told her everything. When I got to the part about Dad showing up, she didn't even flinch. You need to get a restraining order, she said, blunt as always. He's escalating. This isn't about money anymore. It's control. I shook my head. He's never hit me. I can't. She cut me off. Nora, abuse isn't always bruises. That line hit me harder than anything my father ever said. The following week, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street from my house. Same car, same spot. Every day after work, I started checking my locks twice. Lucas started asking why we didn't visit Grandma anymore. One afternoon, he pointed through the blinds. Mom, that man's taking pictures. I looked. My father, standing by the car, pretending to check his phone, camera clearly pointed at our house. That night, I called Destiny again. Enough, she said. We're going to an attorney. The next morning, I sat in a clean, bright office with Vanessa Lee, a local family lawyer with calm eyes and a sharper tongue than anyone I'd ever met. She listened to my story without interrupting, jotting notes, occasionally asking for dates and screenshots. When I finished, she said, Nora, this is harassment. You have a right to safety and peace. We'll file a protective order today. The paperwork took hours. I signed my name so many times my hand cramped. But when Vanessa slid the final page across the table, the one labeled, Restraining Order Request, I felt something I hadn't in years. Ownership of my life, Dad found out 2 days later. He showed up again, this time yelling from the sidewalk, holding a stack of printed texts and bank statements. "You're painting me as a monster," he shouted. "I raised you. I gave you everything." I stepped outside, recording on my phone. "Dad, please leave. You're turning my own grandson against me." "You did that yourself," I said quietly. "When you made love conditional." He stared at me, red-faced, veins tight in his neck. "You'll regret this, Nora." "No," I said. "You will, when the cops show up." And like clockwork, 2 squad cars rolled up at the curb. Vanessa had filed for an emergency hearing that morning, and the officers had already been briefed. One approached him calmly. "Sir, you've been notified of a pending restraining order. You need to leave this property immediately." For a moment, he looked small, not the towering man who'd ruled my childhood, but just a bitter old man realizing his control had expired. He backed away, muttering, "Ungrateful. Always ungrateful." I didn't answer. I just held the door open, watching him disappear down the street. That night, I tucked Lucas into bed. He looked up at me and asked, "Mom, is Grandpa mad?" I hesitated, then said softly, "He's just confused, honey. Sometimes people forget how to love the right way." He nodded like he understood more than I wanted him to. Then he whispered, "I like it better when it's just us." And that was it. The sound of healing. Small, quiet, honest. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and stepped onto the porch. The world looked the same. Same street, same house. But I was different. The old version of me would have been shaking, second-guessing every choice, replaying his words like a guilty child. But now, I felt steady. I'd broken the cycle, the one that said family means control, silence equals peace, and love must be earned. No more. My family could call it betrayal. But I called it freedom. And that, I realized, was the most radical act of revenge there was. Not hurting them, but healing myself. The restraining order had given me 2 months of silence, 2 months of peace I hadn't known since childhood. But peace never lasts long when control is someone's favorite language. One Saturday morning, while Lucas was drawing dinosaurs at the kitchen table, I heard tires crunch on the gravel outside. I looked through the blinds and felt my pulse spike. My parents' SUV. They got out together. Mom clutching a casserole, Dad holding a folded envelope. I stepped onto the porch before they could knock. "Stop right there," I said. Dad raised his hands like I was the unreasonable one. "We're not here to fight, Nora. We just want to talk. The order says we can't come inside, but it doesn't say we can't be in the yard." I crossed my arms. "You're already breaking the spirit of it." Mom's voice trembled. "We brought dinner. You shouldn't be alone with a child all the time. You need your family." That word, family, stung like salt. "Family shows up before the police have to," I said quietly. Dad's face reddened. "You're really proud of yourself, aren't you? Making me out to be a villain. I was only trying to protect what's mine. What's yours?" I repeated, stepping closer. "You mean me? My home, my peace? None of that belongs to you anymore." He exhaled through his nose, like he was trying to steady himself. "You've been brainwashed by therapy," he said. "Your mother and I raised you better than this." "No," I said, my voice sharp. "You raised me to obey, to apologize when I hadn't done anything wrong, to think love was something I had to earn." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Honey, you're twisting everything. We just want to help." "Help?" I laughed, hollow. "You ignored my son's birthday, demanded my paycheck, and spied on my house. That's not help. That's control wrapped in guilt." Dad opened the envelope and held it out. "This is a check. $5,000 just to show we're trying." I didn't move. "Keep it." "Nora, don't be stubborn," Mom pleaded. "Please take it. It's peace money." I looked straight at her. "You can't buy peace. You create it by respecting boundaries." For the first time, my father went quiet. That silence, the one he used all my life to make me shrink, finally lost its power. I stepped down one stair, meeting his eyes. "I need you to listen carefully," because this is the last time we'll ever have this conversation." He didn't speak. Mom wiped at her eyes. "You will not come to my house uninvited. You will not call my work, my friends, or my neighbors. You will not send money, gifts, or guilt. If you want to see Lucas one day, you start with therapy. All of you." Mom's lip trembled. "We can't just—" "You already did," I interrupted. "When you chose silence over love." Dad's jaw tightened. "You're cruel, Nora." I shook my head. "No, I'm consistent. You taught me that choices have consequences, remember?" For a long moment, no one moved. Then, without a word, Dad crumpled the envelope, turned, and walked to the SUV. Mom followed slowly, glancing back once, her face a mix of guilt and disbelief. As they drove away, I felt something heavy leave with them, like a lifetime's worth of expectation lifting off my shoulders. Lucas peeked out from the doorway. "Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa mad?" I crouched to meet his eyes. "They're just learning what no means." He nodded thoughtfully, then smiled. "That's a good word." "Yeah," I said, hugging him. "It really is." That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat on the porch, watching the sunset fade over my quiet street. For years, I'd believed confrontation meant chaos, but standing up for myself hadn't destroyed anything that mattered. It had protected everything that did. Boundaries weren't walls. They were doors, and for the first time, I had the only key. I didn't hate my parents. I just stopped letting their noise drown out my peace, and that, I realized, was the truest kind of freedom. Not winning the argument, but ending it on my terms. Peace didn't last long. It never does when narcissists lose control. 2 weeks after I told my parents to stay away, strange things started happening. A social worker from Child Protective Services showed up at my door. She smiled politely, clipboard in hand. "We received an anonymous report claiming your son is being neglected." For a moment, my body went numb. "Neglected?" I repeated. "You can see for yourself. He's at school, healthy, happy, thriving." The social worker nodded. "It's probably nothing, but we have to follow up." When she left, apologizing for the inconvenience, I sat on my couch shaking. Only one person would be petty enough to weaponize the system like that. My father. That evening, I called Vanessa, my attorney. She didn't sound surprised. "Classic retaliation," she said. "People like your father can't stand losing control. Good news, we can use this. It strengthens your restraining order." By Monday, Vanessa had filed an amendment to include the CPS stunt and the repeated drive-bys my neighbors had documented. I attached photos, my father's car parked across the street, the timestamps, the police incident reports. By Friday, a judge granted a permanent restraining order. My father could no longer contact me, come near my property, or reach out through anyone else, including Tyler or Bethany. When the order arrived in the mail, I didn't cry. I smiled, because for once the law was on my side, not his. Of course, control doesn't die quietly. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. "You've humiliated this family enough. Dad's health is failing. You'll regret this when he's gone." No signature. But I didn't need one. "Bethany." I typed back. "Then maybe he should spend his energy healing instead of harassing. Goodbye." Blocked. That night, I lay awake, realizing how far they were willing to go to keep me in the role they built. The obedient daughter, the peacekeeper, the emotional punching bag. But I wasn't her anymore. They'd taught me everything about manipulation, and I'd learned how to dismantle it. The next morning, I sent an email to their country club, attaching copies of the restraining order and a statement from Vanessa outlining the CPS harassment. By that afternoon, Dad's membership was suspended pending review. For the first time in his life, he couldn't buy his way out. I didn't do it out of revenge. I did it out of justice. Because bullies only stop when consequences hit where it hurts most. Their reputation. That night, I watched Lucas asleep under the glow of his nightlight, peaceful and safe, and I promised myself, the cycle of control ends with me. No more fear. No more guilt. No more silence disguised as love. My parents had chosen retaliation. I chose peace, and that was the difference between surviving and finally living. For most of my life, my parents taught me that power belonged to whoever shouted the loudest. But standing in that courthouse, surrounded by silence and paperwork, I finally learned the truth. Real power speaks softly, through evidence, calm, and consequence. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early fall. I wore a navy blazer, simple makeup, and no jewelry. I didn't need armor anymore, just clarity. Vanessa, my attorney, stood beside me like a quiet storm in heels. Across the aisle sat my parents, pale and brittle, with a lawyer I recognized from my father's old business circle. When the judge entered, everyone rose. I kept my gaze steady. This wasn't revenge. This was accountability. Vanessa spoke first. Your Honor, my client, Ms. Bennett, seeks a permanent restraining order and damages for emotional distress, defamation, and malicious interference, including a falsified Child Protective Services report intended to intimidate her. The opposing attorney shifted uncomfortably. When my father took the stand, his confidence cracked under questioning. Vanessa didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Mr. Bennett, are you aware that your vehicle was recorded outside Ms. Bennett's residence on 7 occasions after the temporary restraining order was issued? I was checking on my grandson. By taking photos through her window? Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. When asked about the CPS call, his lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Vanessa displayed the report number and the trace to a burner phone purchased 2 days after our confrontation. Registered to Elaine Bennett. My mother broke first. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "We didn't mean harm. We just wanted her to come home." The judge leaned forward. "You called a state agency to accuse your daughter of neglect because she wouldn't give you money or access. That is harm." Silence filled the room. It was the kind of silence that exposes truth. When it was my turn to testify, my hands shook, but my voice didn't. I'm not here to destroy my parents. I'm here to end a pattern that destroyed me. I was raised to believe love meant control, guilt, and silence. But love protects. It doesn't threaten. I'm asking the court to protect my son from the same pain I grew up with. When I sat down, Vanessa gave me a small nod. A quiet victory. The judge's ruling came 2 weeks later. The restraining order was made permanent, with strict no-contact conditions. The court also ordered monetary restitution for legal fees and lost wages. A modest sum, but symbolically priceless. My parents' lawyer requested leniency, arguing they were elderly and emotional. The judge's reply was firm. Emotional doesn't excuse harassment. When I stepped outside the courthouse, the autumn air felt cleaner somehow, sharper, freer. Vanessa smiled. You didn't just win a case, Nora. You changed the narrative. That night, I took Lucas for ice cream. He held his cone carefully, his laughter echoing through the small parlor. For once, I didn't feel watched, judged, or weighed down by old expectations. Later, after tucking him in, I opened my notebook, the one I'd used to document every message, every visit, every manipulation. I tore out the last page, the one that read, "Prove I'm not powerless." I didn't need proof anymore, because justice had already spoken, and for the first time, it spoke in my voice. When people like my father lose control, they always believe they've lost everything. What they never understand is that control was never love. It was fear wearing a family name tag. The weeks after the court ruling were quieter than I ever imagined. No more voicemails, no cars parked across the street, no fake apologies, just silence, the kind that felt like sunlight after years underground. Then the consequences began. Their community learned the truth. My father's reputation, the pillar of respectability he'd built over decades, began to crumble. The country club suspended him. His company dropped him from the board after the harassment record surfaced. My mother, who had always hidden behind his authority, found herself isolated. Her friends stopped inviting her to luncheons. Her perfect image cracked under whispers of restraining order and CPS complaint. For years, she'd told me, family matters stay private. Now everyone knew exactly what our family had been hiding. Tyler lost the financial support that had always cushioned his failures. Bethany, who once mocked me for being too emotional, called Vanessa's office begging to have her name removed from legal filings. Actions have consequences, and for the first time, I wasn't the one paying the price. But here's what surprised me most. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Not the cinematic kind of freedom where you drive into the sunset, but the quiet kind, where you finally exhale without guilt. I stopped waiting for their apology. I stopped replaying old conversations in my head, wondering what I could have said differently. The answer had always been the same: nothing. Because I wasn't the problem. I was just the scapegoat who refused to play the role anymore. Lucas flourished. He laughed more, slept better, stopped asking when Grandpa was coming. He started drawing pictures of our little family, just him, me, and our cat, with the caption, "Home." That word hit me harder than any court ruling. We were building something new, something real. Love that didn't demand repayment, peace that didn't require permission. One night I stood by Lucas's door, listening to his soft breathing. And I realized I hadn't just escaped my family's control, I'd broken the cycle. For generations, we'd mistaken fear for love and obedience for respect. That chain ended with me. I closed his door gently and whispered into the quiet house. We're free now. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. 6 months had passed since the court ruling, and for the first time in years, my home felt like home. There was no constant anxiety humming under the walls, no fear of the next phone call, no second-guessing every word I said. Just mornings filled with the smell of pancakes and Lucas's laughter echoing through the kitchen. Every so often, I still caught myself waiting for my father's voice, that sharp, commanding tone that used to turn my stomach to knots. But now there was only quiet. And in that quiet, I found peace. I poured everything I had into rebuilding our life, not to prove anything, but to live. I started volunteering twice a month at a women's legal aid clinic, the same kind of place I once called in desperation, not knowing what to do. I'd sit across from women who were scared, ashamed, or exhausted, and I'd tell them, "You're not crazy. You're just tired of being controlled." Each time, I saw a flicker of hope in their eyes, the same flicker that had once saved me. I also reconnected with people who had stood by me quietly through the chaos. Co-workers, my friend Destiny, and even my boss, who promoted me after seeing how hard I'd fought to stay steady during the storm. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen, not as someone's daughter, sister, or scapegoat, but as me. One Saturday, Lucas came home from school carrying a folded piece of paper. "Mom," he said, grinning, "I made something for you." It was a drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands under a blue sky, one tall, one small, and a caption in uneven handwriting. "Me and Mom. We're safe." My throat tightened as I knelt beside him. "What made you draw this, sweetheart?" He shrugged. "Because we are." Simple words. Profound truth. I hung that drawing on the fridge next to our grocery list. A small daily reminder that safety isn't given by others. It's built, one boundary at a time. As the seasons changed, so did I. The anger that once fueled me turned into quiet strength. The fear that used to paralyze me became wisdom. I stopped calling what happened family drama. It was abuse, emotional, financial, psychological. And naming it didn't make me bitter. It made me honest. One evening, Destiny and I sat on my porch watching the sunset. She swirled her wine and smiled. "You know," she said, "a year ago, you couldn't even say the word no without apologizing." I laughed softly. "Now it's my favorite word." She raised her glass. "To peace?" "To peace," I said, clinking mine against hers. "And to never mistaking silence for love again." A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, shaky, and unsigned. But I recognized the penmanship immediately. "My mother's, Nora. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I see it now. The things we let him do. the way we let you carry everything. It wasn't love. It was survival. I hope you and Lucas are happy. I hope one day you'll let that happiness be enough. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. No response, no anger, just acceptance. Sometimes closure doesn't come from reconciliation. It comes from release. That winter, Lucas and I decorated our small living room for Christmas. No big family dinner, no guilt-filled traditions. Just us, a few friends, cookies, and music. As he placed the final ornament on the tree, he turned to me and said, "Mom, this is my favorite Christmas ever." I smiled, pulling him into my arms. "Mine too, baby. Mine too." That night, after he went to bed, I stood by the window, watching snow drift past the streetlights. I thought about how much I'd lost, and how much I'd gained. I used to think justice was about punishing those who hurt you. But now I know, justice is living well despite them. Justice is laughter in the kitchen, a safe home, and a child who sleeps without fear. Justice is peace you build yourself, and freedom, real freedom, isn't loud. It's the quiet certainty that you don't owe your pain to anyone anymore. Life lesson for the listener. If you've ever been told that love means sacrifice, remember this. Love that demands you shrink isn't love. It's control. You don't have to earn the right to be respected. You don't have to destroy yourself to keep a family together. And you're allowed to build peace even if others call it betrayal. Because walking away from people who hurt you isn't cruelty. It's healing. And one day, when you finally stop explaining why you deserve peace, you'll realize that the silence that follows isn't loneliness. It's freedom.